Welcome to Commerce Media Matters, your go-to podcast for unpacking the world of commerce media. Here, we catch up with industry leaders on news, research, insights, perspectives, and everything in between.
Hi, I'm Paul, Chief Growth Officer at Voodoo.
And I'm Nick, founder and CEO at Voodoo.
Today we're joined by Adam Skinner, Managing Director of Retail Media at Epsilon. Adam has a wealth of experience in retail media and ad tech, including leadership roles at Citrus Ads, giving him a unique perspective on how the industry has evolved and where it's heading next.
And it's fair to say there's plenty happening right now. Retail media continues to grow, but at the same time, we're hearing more conversations about saturation, interoperability, and whether the industry is entering a new phase of maturity or simply its next chapter of growth.
There's certainly no shortage of topics to cover. I'm really excited about this chat. So today we're digging into where the industry is heading next, where the biggest opportunities lie, and where commerce media is becoming a much bigger part of the conversation. So Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This is a long time coming and great to be here.
Overdue, mate. Overdue.
Yeah.
So Adam, as Managing Director of Retail Media at Epsilon and previously COO and CTO at Citrus Ad, you've had a front row seat to retail media and ad tech's evolution. Looking back, what do you think people still misunderstand most about retail media today?
Yeah, it's interesting, Nick, because I think I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago on my one of my LinkedIn articles, and I was talking about, in all honesty, I think one of the most misunderstood things that probably people have is like they think retail media just started in 2012. And it was like a thing like where maybe it was like Amazon launching their ads business and McKinsey talking about the third wave, of advertising. But the reality is that we all grew up around in the 1990s and, around that period, like where you'd go to a store like a Coles or a Woolworths, and they would have an end cap display, for Weet-Bix with the cricket stars on the box or whatever, or Mars was paying for eye-level shelf space, for all of their confectionery.
Yeah.
And so realistically, what I think about, is retail media hasn't kind of like just come in the last like few years. It's really just been a kind of like genuinely, it's just been a change in the model, like a shift. There's still those uncomfortable questions that brands are asking, retailers all the time, which is, I've put some money into this campaign. Can you show me how that's like lifted my sales, or what's that done to drive new to brand customers or new to category customers? And they would have been asking those questions back in the 1990s with those trade campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we're talking to the authority on this because, Adam, you probably, you're a humble guy, but you've just won an award for services to retail media for 10 years of service or so. Talk us through that.
Yeah, so I'm obviously a member of, and Epsilon is a member of Path to Purchase Institute here in the US, which is a body that looks at kind of like commerce and an independent body that looks at commerce media and retail media. And we just finished the Path to Purchase Retail Media Summit for 2026, and attached to that is industry awards, where they recognize contributions to the industry. There was a number of people, that big industry stalwarts, that have kind of like been recognized. So like Molly Helm from Ace Hardware, Drew Cashmore from Vantage, Brian DeCoveney from Barrow's Connected Store. These are all industry veterans that have come through the ranks, whether that's through Walmart or whether that's through Triad Retail Media in the early days, or even Citrus Ad in the early days as well.
Well, I mean, I don't know that you're old enough to be called a veteran, but we are honoured to have the newly crowned services to retail media on here talking. So you're coming from a place of authority. Hey, one of the narratives we're hearing most often is that retail media is starting to become really crowded. There's retail media networks popping up all over the place. Everyone seems to be launching a network. And some people are starting to talk about saturation.
Or consolidation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you agree with that assessment or?
Look, I think the core point here is that saturation is really only true if you define retail media narrowly as endemic sponsored products. If you widen the lens, the growth is unlimited effectively. Okay. And like that's, I think, the core of this is that, yes, I think the saturation narrative is half right. Okay, we're reaching a point whereby, to be fair, a lot of the brands are kind of going, well, we can't afford to work with 150 different media networks. We don't have the tools, we don't have the people, we don't have the the budgets to be, we don't just have a miraculous bucket of money that we can kind of like go and pull from somewhere else to invest in all of these. It's the same bucket of money. So they're effectively picking the retail media networks that are ultimately going to be able to give them reach and validated reach. Okay. And when you look at it as well, like I think the other thing that's rather interesting is like, particularly here in the US alone, in the last few years, we've added 150 retail media networks to the mix.
Massive.
Super competitive space.
It's super competitive. Yeah. And if you look at some of the eMarketer reports here in the US that have come out recently, and like Sarah Mazzano, who's one of the analysts for eMarketer, she talks about the fact that when you talk about market share, okay, like 88% of all incremental dollars into retail media is here in the US is still going to Walmart, Amazon, Target. That other 11 or 12% from an endemic standpoint is left for the other 150 odd retail media networks. So every single time we add a retail media network to the mix, okay, we're ultimately just diluting that kind of like that side. So I think the endemic ceiling is real because there's only so many. Like I said, it's not this miraculous bucket of money that the brands can just kind of like keep topping up or pulling from. But this is where I would say it's half right. I think retail media isn't approaching a ceiling. It's like living in a 10-bedroom mansion. Only 4 rooms have been walked into. Like I see the opportunity where I see the growth opportunity coming from these all of these retail media networks is really the ability to be able to tell a audience scarcity story, okay, or an audience uniqueness story, probably the best way to describe it. CPGs are always going to buy Amazon, Walmart, and Target.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how does a super regional grocer tell the story that you as a CPG brand can get access to this unique audience that you can't find through Amazon, Walmart, and Target? So it's like the message is keep buying Amazon, Walmart, and Target, but buy us to get to reach shoppers that necessarily you can't reach through those other networks. And I think this is where that intelligence starts to come in from the retailer sense that there's still some growth opportunity with retail media. And then when you layer in commerce media, okay, in there, and you start layering in non-endemic in there, that's where I think the retailers are sitting on a gold mine, okay, of authenticated customer relationships, okay, where they might be kind of tapping out on endemic, they can tap into non-endemic.
That's the growth.
Yeah.
That non-endemic and potentially the different types of media, like an off-site play too, right?
Yeah, like a co-branded play, or the other area like that I think is really important to call out is like data partnerships as well. So like we're seeing here in the US, clean rooms and second party data sharing in a privacy safe haven environment. But only about half of all of the media networks here in the US offer that capability today. So there's an enormous white space to be able to kind of like capitalize on that. And then I think the one that is, I just came from Path to Purchase, and the topic that was like in every single keynote discussion was in store. It's all coming full circle because the reality is that approximately 80% of all commerce still happens within a brick and mortar store. Okay, but 90% of retail media is still on site and digital. And so I think brands are looking at now.
And let me unpack
this
cross-node measurement for
I would
a second.
say biggest opportunity for them to be able to stitch the on-site, the off-site, and the in-store together, bring it all under from an omni-channel perspective. I think the fourth area that's of rather interest, okay, and why I say there is really like it's a half story around kind of saturation, and that fourth area is retailers using like connected TV. That broadens the ability for them to be able to reach in market authenticated customers that they could never do through linear TV before. Okay, because when you think of it, I'm logged into my Netflix account, I'm logged into my Amazon Prime account. It knows that it's me instead of my kids, or it knows it's me instead of my wife. It knows what preferences I've got. And then really you think of that as an extension of kind of like, say, offsite and onsite, because you can measure engagement, particularly with Amazon Prime. Like you can kind of go, add this to my cart from your remote.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you can. And they did some them and Google. Google did some great announcements last week, and they're on that same journey with being logged into YouTube and being able to add to the marketplace. I understand from I've just come back from NRF in Asia that it's early days in terms of getting the merchants to sign up with Google to all of it. But that is a really interesting space, and certainly a space that we play in from a Voodoo perspective as well. It's around that ability to interact with the ad creative and add it to cart or buy it there from the experience, which is a great extension for retailers.
Oh, absolutely. I agree as well. I think the other thing that it's of rather interest is like when you look at kind of like some of the super regional and regional retailers, and then you look at some of the long tail of brands, in order to get into an LTV, like a linear TV campaign, they were muscled and boxed out of that because the spend that you have to put against a linear TV campaign would be broad and wide kind of thing, whereas they can kind of go. They can go targeted, okay? And so they can kind of go like, we only operate in Texas, okay? So we only want to target Texas subscribers of Prime. And this brand is only stocked in these vicinity areas of Austin. So we only want to talk about that. And so I think that CTV as a product gives the retailers real reach as opposed to just the spray and pray, I suppose, scenario with LTV.
Yeah. And then you can go even further than that, can't you? I mean, if you're a coffee pod distributor in a specific location regionally, and you know that somebody has a coffee pod machine every 3 months, you got that data.
Exactly.
The other thing I was going to just add on to the saturation discussion, which I think is linked, is to me, it seems like there is a lot of retail media networks just popping up and putting ads everywhere in their store and thinking that's a retail media network. I think, talk to me about the ones that are doing it well. From my perspective, it's the ones that can prove that there is some sort of incrementality or there is some sort of outcome measurement piece. And if there's outcomes and measurement, then people will find more money because the outcome is paying for the investment.
Yeah, so I agree. Like, I think the dividing line is like, whether you've built a strategic media business versus just a checkout for inventory. So when you look at it, it's like some of the media networks have just built like a stood up a self-service sponsored product platform, and then they've just called it a day. Versus others that have like paired, what I'd probably call like 3 or 4 different areas, okay, that they're very good at, which is real data partnerships.
Adam, what's the mix there? Sorry to interject, but what's the mix there versus just standing up the sponsored ad versus the strategic mix? As say of those 150 that you talk of, what was percentage have actually got it together?
I would say it's legacy. So it's a lot of the earlier media networks that stood up that was just kind of like, let's just focus on our owned and operated on site. And I think now all of the media networks that have been stood up recently, they're realizing that they can't just focus on owned and operated. Okay, they need to look and be differentiated, and the way to be differentiated is they really need to enter into a partnership with the brand. Okay, because that's really what it is. Like, there's joint business planning, there is telling a really unique story with the measurement and the narrative around that. Okay, it's no good just printing off a report that shows ROAS was 40%. Okay, that doesn't really tell a story to the brand. The brand wants to know, like, okay, sure, it might only be 40% ROAS, but it grew the category of new to brand in this category by 400 new customers during this campaign, and the long-term value of that to the brand is way more valuable than just telling the ROAS metric.
Yep.
And so I think the other area is like, them investing in an identity graph, because one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is I think the next evolution of commerce media, not going to be just around ads. It's going to be around the authenticated customer relationships and the intent signals that these retailers and commerce players are sitting on. And that is liquid gold, because that's what's going to fuel the next $10 billion worth of media that's going to come through. And then I think the other piece here is like really around making that technology and that ad stack really interoperable, opening that up to demand partners, and making it so that it's really easy, for a brand to be able to activate on your media network.
Yeah.
As part of their overarching marketing plan, as well as those joint business plans.
Yeah, I would say as well, like, just going back to our earlier point around kind of like the uniqueness, like in that audience uniqueness, I don't think there's going to be any reduction in kind of like the incremental dollars that are going to flow through to Amazon, Walmart, and Target, because realistically it's a reach. There's no other retail media networks out there that have that level of reach. But I'll back it up. What I'm seeing across other media networks, and the capability leadership in the category is Kroger, HEB, Albertsons, Ace Hardware, Family Dollar, Micro Center, which is like a electronics chain here. They're all the ones that are defining and showing the uniqueness of their audience, and they're also showing what good looks like with like clean room measurement. They're also showing, what good looks like with holistic omni-channel across on-site, off-site, in-store, and then adding CTV into the mix as well.
Yeah, right. Because there's no sort of digital-only customer, no in-store-only customer anymore. As a consumer myself, you do your research online. Sometimes you want to buy it online, but a lot of the times you go in store and vice versa. You see something in store, you checked it out, and you didn't make the decision there, but you go back online later. So
yeah,
you're a multi-touch consumer, aren't you?
Yeah, well, everybody is. I think I think that's the thing. I think piecing it all together, like you're just saying there, Adam, is where I think, what's the experience that I'm offering that's adding to the consumer's experience with us?
Yeah, and I think really, there has been a bit of an over-index, I would say, on the, what would you call it, like building media networks, and then not indexing on the customer experience in the same token. So I think a lot of the retailers that are launching media networks now are taking a step back and actually having a look at kind of like, how does this from a on-site or from an off-site, what does the creative look like? How do we map in the in-store experience, into this? They're all putting the customer at the center of everything that they're doing.
There's a great case study from NRF New York around Dick's Sporting Goods, and they really understood the roles of each channel played in the consumer journey, and the role that and the content that they needed to supply, or the experiences that they needed to give based on those touch points. So online was very different to in-store. In-store was now it's an experience. You need to go in there and touch and play with that baseball bat and make sure that they have a swing and the rest of it. Online was, I've traveled interstate to play baseball and I need my glove and I can have it delivered there, to my hotel. It was a great case study of using each of the touch points to create a better user experience all around.
And a connected channel experience. Exactly. And I think this is like where I think is really important, and that is that I don't think there's any success, in a 2019-esque banner display campaign going up on a retailer's website. And what we're seeing with great success with all of the on-site now is that's becoming a real immersive experience, and video and animation and personalization of that creative from a dynamic content optimization as well as a personalization level, okay, that's the baseline of what customers expect. They don't want a generic ad anymore. They want that ad to be completely personalized to them. Okay, not going to the end of the spectrum where it's really creepy, but knowing that retailer and that brand knows who they are,
and allowing them the opportunity to interact on their terms.
Exactly.
Right? It's not just linear, not just click through somewhere else. The whole experience. I mean, at the end of the day, when we're talking commerce media or retail media, it's an extension of traditional shopping. You need to be able to experience the product, make your selections, personalize that shirt to be the right size, right color. You need to be able to almost touch and feel like you would if you were going in store in a digital experience as well. So
you're giving the choice, right? You're empowering the consumer at any touch point.
Exactly. And I think if you look at it as well, like, when you look at it, retail media is a pretty expensive surface space, and the real estate is pretty limited. You need to maintain every single second of that shopper's attention, because if you're just putting things in that there's no value to the consumer, then that's a wasted opportunity. And so I think this is where, you need to treat on-site and off-site like it was a TV campaign. Okay, because every second of customer interaction is liquid gold.
Yep, absolute integration, right?
Yeah.
So those seamless integrated experiences, regardless of the touch point, and carrying them along that journey. Adam, you touched on it earlier. It's come up a bit, the commerce media side of things, and we are the podcast of Commerce Media Matters. So we're kind of something we're interested in. Commerce media, discussing on this podcast, we discussed it a lot in regards to, retail media versus commerce media. You spent a lot of time thinking about it. You talked about it. What's your viewpoint on the difference between the retail media and commerce media, all these commerce media kind of networks, and the power of them? Because Paul and I love them, right? We went to the Connective, the United Airlines launch a couple of years ago at Cannes, and we were just blown away. And since experienced that product and it's superior, what's your take on that?
I think the way that I picture it, and the way that I like to simplify it, is think of this as kind of like a concentric circle ring, where you've got the first ring is really data, transactional data, all of the first party data that the retailer is sitting on. Okay. And then the next ring out of that is retail media. So all of the retail media, I suppose all of retail media networks that are inside there that are kind of like activating against that. And then the next ring out is commerce media. Okay. And so the way that I like to look at it is like commerce media is advertising powered by first party customer and transaction data, regardless of where that transaction actually happens, versus retail media is the version of that actually just exists only inside the retailers and only where that transaction from a one-to-one scenario happens. Commerce media is like the broader category, or it's like the umbrella of it, and retail media is the foundation that we all base commerce media on.
Absolutely.
Someone asked me in the last couple of days, they're like, are we going to go through a rebrand? It's just going to be called commerce media in the future. And like, I think our industry has this weird fascination with rebrands. Okay. Like, programmatic.
Yeah, I know.
And labels.
Yeah. And labels, like programmatic became addressable, and, display became digital, and like all of this. But like, ultimately, I think, the real definition here is that commerce media is like as I said, the overarching umbrella. It's not really a change. It's like, the way to look at it is that a consumer's life, and we said this before, that like a consumer's life was never a single category. Okay. They could ultimately traverse through a retailer and a commerce, and a shopper doesn't stop having needs as soon as they walk out of the grocery store.
And the way they engage with products doesn't change, right?
Way they engage, and it hasn't changed. They bought a flight for 3.5 hours, and they're sitting on the United flight, and they've got the seat back on the United flight. They check into a hotel, they go to a gym that sits in that outer commerce media layer. These are all like intent signals that are rich and are valuable to
Absolutely.
both that commerce media network, but also to the retail media networks as well, because that enables them to be able to stitch together a full story about that consumer that they would only get when that consumer is visiting them, 2 or 3 times a week.
that's the big promise of commerce media and retail media, isn't it? Is the ability to be able to measure. And, for us, we were lucky enough to win a couple of awards ourselves at the Drum Commerce
stop
Media
it, Paul.
Awards. And, I'm going to
Stop
have to
it.
stop bringing
Keep
that
going.
up pretty soon. But moreover, our other colleagues that won awards that night, it seemed to be a shift to rewarding transactional outcomes or real outcomes far further down than just those vanity media metrics that have traditionally been awarded. And not to say that brand metrics and other things isn't an important part, and I think that retail media can do that as well. But it seems to me that that's kind of the big promise, and it's starting to come to fruition with all the, I guess, the technology, the identity piece that we were talking about before, that first party data, and then the ability to sort of measure then what happens post the clicks at a transactional level, or at least that intent, even if it's not the transaction,
It's intent.
it's those intent signals, those values that you were talking about before that can then be reused.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but measurement's hotly debated. Who's doing measurement well, and where do you think measurement really needs to evolve in this space to be match fit and perfect to live up to the promise? I think it's getting there, but it's probably there's pockets that are doing really well, but who is doing it well?
Yeah, look, I think if you look at retailers, their biggest, I would say, asset is their ability to be able to have both the on-site, off-site, and in-store, and be able to show a full end-to-end narrative between that. Okay, so I always look to kind of like Albertsons Media Collective. I look at like Ace Hardware, okay, as well, and be able to stitch together that omni-channel story and be anchored in incrementality, because I think that's the key here. I know incrementality is this buzzword, okay, but in my eyes, incrementality is more than just that metric itself, okay. It's actually the anchor to be able to tell the story, okay, as to the truth of whether or not that campaign actually had an outcome. So, did that campaign actually drive true lift or true sales lift against a control? Did that campaign drive new to brand customers, new to category customers? Did that campaign actually increase our share of voice or share of the category? And I think that's really what retail media measurement standardization standpoint, that's where we need to get to from metric standardization. But I also think that we need to go the other way, which is these retailers need to be able to have the ability and the capability to be able to tell that unique story and that unique narrative with what is unique to them.
With unique audiences, right?
Yeah, unique audiences. Or, if they're going through their joint business planning with the brand, they need to be able to say it's more than just ROAS. They need to be able to say, well, during this Easter campaign or this Thanksgiving campaign or this Halloween campaign, for this confectionery product, we've actually driven 5,000 new to brand customers. And that to you is like over a lifetime value is highly valuable to the brand.
We're starting to see brands use commerce media throughout the customer journey rather than just lower funnel conversion channel. How are you seeing commerce media evolve as both brand and a performance driver?
Yeah, look, for me, it's like, I think the shift is really that it's going from bottom funnel search tool to full funnel ecosystem. And we've touched on this, I think, again. So as we move through 2026, I think the winners won't be the brands that are buying the most keywords. They're going to be the ones that are going to be building and optimizing across the full funnel. And so really the honest caveat that I have here, okay, is that full funnel commerce media is a longer build than performance retail media. You can stand up a sponsored product on-site platform in a quarter, but the brand building plays like CTV partnerships, building in-store networks from an infrastructure standpoint, cross-node measurement.
Cross-node.
Yeah, cross-node measurement. They take longer.
This guy loves it. He's so good at these catchphrases. So good.
Because they depend on partnerships that you can't really fast track. And I was like, that's not really a weakness. It's just I think it's just really a play that some of these retail media networks and commerce media networks need to kind of like go down. If we go back to kind of the measurement loop, in my opinion, the closed loop stops being a node, okay, like a single kind of node, and starts to being a network of nodes. If you start with what retail media solved, because it's the foundation of where this all came from, because prior to that, trade media, okay, or trade wasn't really measured. And so retail media is the first major channel, okay, where the ad, the click, and the purchase, okay, all happen inside one environment. And if and it's all tied back to a resolved single identity. Okay. So that's not just measurement. Okay. It's a ground truth. And I said that before, it's the basis of kind of like the ground truth
floor,
of where,
right?
the floor of work where like retail media, commerce media is going. And so I go back to kind of like, there was like a marketer here in the US, okay, Wanamaker, and he at a conference made a joke around, half of my media dollars and my media is wasted. I just don't know which half.
I know which half.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. The old adage.
This now, the world that we're living in, that's close to being false. Okay, because you can ultimately resolve, okay, and work out where that media wastage is actually going. And so, and so the insight that most people miss, okay, in this is that closed loop is not just useful for measuring kind of like a sponsored product. It could be the calibration for that entire media spend and the entire stack. So a brand could actually use a deterministic signal, okay, to determine where their channel mix, okay, or recalibrate their marketing mix model. And so like that could be marketing calibration across social, CTV, on site, off site, etc. as well. So the way that I see this and this kind of like node of network of nodes, okay, is that as commerce media starts to expand, the closed loop multiplies. Okay, because banks see transactions, airlines see bookings, hotels see stays, telcos see your phone usage and your upgrades and those type of things. Okay, but here's the catch, I suppose, that changes everything about measurement. No single commerce media node owns the complete closed loop. It's just like they've got a signal to story to be able to
specific part of the
consumer journey, because we go back to my earlier statement, which is that a consumer just doesn't buy in a linear fashion, okay, and so a campaign running across, say, Walmart Connect, Chase, and maybe United Airlines will is equally measured across all of those.
And it's those individual nodes that now can be grouped together for that
exactly
journey. Yeah, I mean, from a brand perspective, it's harder and harder these days with AI and it being text terms to stand out as a brand and get people to actually, especially new to brand. How do you introduce someone to your brand? How do you get them touching and feeling? I mean, what I like with some of the retailers, our local ones at home here, with some of the non-endemic brands where they've found that unique audience that you were talking about, Adam. So David Jones, and doing some crossover with some activation in store with like the likes of Lexus cars, and with their premium audience, the rest of it, where you can actually touch and feel the car aligned to fashion moments, around spring racing. And I just think that that's maybe a piece that isn't as well thought of when it comes to retail media and commerce media. Is you can do so much, and how better to get a brand across is that experience, that touchy-feely experience in store, and how do you then connect that to the digital ecosystem from there? And I think we do talk too much about the performance because it's the obvious one, and it certainly shows the numbers to the CTO when I spent X on the sponsored listing and got this ROI, but this more intangible brand stuff, I think, is a huge opportunity.
Yeah. And look, I think there's like Like I was at IAB Connected Commerce a couple of weeks ago, in New York, and there was a panel there that had a couple of people on it, and they were debating, having a bit of a healthy debate around, is ROAS dead? As a metric. And Austin Leonard from Dollar General, from DG Earn, he was like, no, it's not. It's an end-to-end conversation. He's like, we still need to be anchored into ROAS, but it shouldn't be the only metric that we're using, because the history of ROAS and the background of ROAS is the old Google search ads days, where you could have like the ad is directly correlated to a click and an outcome. In retail media, that might not be the case, because you might show an ad in store or online, and that person goes on and purchases another product that might be a part of that brand. And the story there is that, like that campaign that was for a Coca-Cola product, but they drove the purchase to a Coke Zero or a Sprite or something. ROAS doesn't tell that story. Whereas new to brand, new to category, share of voice, share of category, those
anchored
metrics
in ROAS, and then along with the others.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's shift gears a little bit. I mean, you're obviously a good Australian that's been living in Chicago. Yeah. Well, all Australians are good Australians, aren't
Says
they?
the Kiwi.
Yeah, that's right. Shout out to my Kiwi brothers and sisters. But Adam, you've got a view across global markets to a degree. Who's doing it really well? How does Australia stack up to the likes of the UK and Europe? And obviously the US is so big and they're doing so many things. What's happening on the global sphere?
Yeah, look, the thing I've learned as well is, like, working across these markets, that is, each of the markets have their own level of maturity, and some parts of the stack are still catching up on others. And so if you take the two markets that I know the best, which is the ANZ market and the US, I think they're different in that sense, and they're both mature markets, but they're just mature in different ways. So if you take the US, for example, like I would say they're genuinely mature in kind of clean room data partnerships, super advanced, and offsite media here as well. So offsite here in the US, is now already more than 20% of the US retail media spend, and it's growing. So it's continuing to grow. The clean room ecosystem is starting to grow as well, because like we touched on non-endemic, and we touched on, first-party data partnerships, those type of things. In order for that to be successful, like the clean room ecosystem needs to be mature, because you need to have a brand and a retailer coming together in a privacy safe environment to be able to collaborate using their first party data. So that is very mature. And when we've also here in the US got a sleuth of and a like of non-retail commerce media networks that are maturing as well. So like you take, like, say, Chase Media, you've got United Connective, we spoke about that before. You've got Marriott that have just launched their Riot Media, and you've got some of them even working together. So I think United and Marriott are using clean rooms because they've got that same consumer. Yep, correct. Yeah. So it's like, like you might get even with United now, like, last time I was on a flight, they actually have personalization on the seat back. So when you get to your seat, it's like, welcome, cool. Adam, kind of thing like that. And so they know that the person sitting in 13C is Adam, and
would have been 1A, wouldn't it, Adam?
Come on. So there's that, which is really, I think, really cool as well. So yeah, I think where the US is catching up, is in store. There's still
a massive growth
opportunity in the US for in-store. And we've seen some of our Australian friends, like Cusick, Barrow's Connected Store, they're really driving this maturity for bringing the last frontier of the store back into that into that retail media ecosystem, whether that's through connected screens or whether that's through connected audio, as well. So I think the most digitally sophisticated market here which is the US, has a massive growth opportunity. They've barely tapped that. But then when we flip it around to Australia, it's the mirror image.
They're doing really well in
Really
store.
well in store.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got, I think their strengths in Australia and New Zealand, okay, is the on-site. Okay, so the owned and operated channels, their in-store and near-store capabilities. Okay, particularly from if you look at like the likes of say Woolworths and others and Coles, okay, that interconnected tissue that they operate between all of the channels, from whether that's connecting the on-site to the off-site to the in-store experiences, okay, and the near-store, I think that's probably the most mature market out there. And if you look at where all of the not to toot the innovation side, but if you look at where a majority of all of the in-store and I would say on-site innovation from a retail media sense has come from, it's come from Australia.
That's
pretty cool.
Like,
we're still innovating.
Like you guys, okay,
Yeah.
Citrus Ad born out of
Thanks,
Brisbane, okay, the QSIC guys born out of Australia as well. I think it's a real innovation hub, okay, but it goes back to what we said earlier, which is those assets, okay, were mature because of the way that retail in Australia and New Zealand operated. Okay, which was, you operated inside a shopping mall. Okay, you had to have foot traffic being driven to your store, and so that was really the foundations of their in-store and digital out-of-home networks.
Mm-hmm.
So cool.
What's interesting, I've just obviously mentioned before that it come back from NRF and in Singapore, and the Asian markets I think are going to be fast followers. I think they're a bit slower to develop both of those on both of those fronts, but they have the benefit of being able to sit back and have developed products to take advantage of and see where others went wrong in those more mature markets.
They're the markets that most interest me. So there's two markets that really interest me, okay, of where this is going, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. Latin America is one, but Asia Pacific, okay, particularly Southeast Asia, where the edge isn't scale, it's actually convergence.
Yeah.
Okay. And what I mean by that is like, it's like, retail, finance, travel, health and fitness, okay, and mobility all living inside this kind of like single super app kind of ecosystem. And they've already got the foundation and the ecosystem already set up. It's like, and then how do they extend that out? There's like, there's a company called TOS Payments in Korea. And so they're already looking at how do they operate inside from a media perspective across, all of the sectors. And the interesting one is Lotte in Korea. Okay, so
we saw them speak at NRF. And, very interesting.
They've got this super unique and powerful business because they operate not only department stores, they operate car hire companies. They own 7-Eleven in Korea. They've got hotels, duty free. Okay,
it's a conglomerate play, right?
It's a conglomerate.
You see the same thing in Japan too, with the conglomerates who own these multiple footprints and they can bring it all together.
And bring it all together because, we go back to before, like, a customer doesn't interact with one retailer, okay, or one segment, they're not linear, okay, they're like this throughout their kind of like journey life cycle, okay, and throughout their life cycle, they might change between, okay, a budget retailer versus a premium retailer, or a budget hotel versus a premium hotel. So I think this is what's really interesting is these, this convergence model is one to watch, because I think that may also kind of like correlate to what's also happening in Europe as well. And if you look at like what's happening in Europe, like you've got like Unlimitail, which is the Carrefour Publicis joint venture. They're trying to solve the fragmentation problem, okay, of like what's here in the US with like multiple media networks all launching, and they're trying to stitch that together across a single network that allows long tail retailers, okay, or retailers who don't have the capability or the internal technical capability to be able to launch a media network, to be able to get in and capture those brand dollars. And I think that's another thing in the European market that's of rather interest as well.
What are some of the most interesting commerce media examples you've seen in the market?
We touched on Chase Media Solutions being one of them, but like the reason why I point to this as kind of like the most interesting example in market, because they're able to capture, okay, not just kind of like what's running through their payment card network, but they've also got like their Chase Rewards app, okay, that's also capturing kind of like rewards across different retailers, different industries, etc., like that. And so they've done a number of like what I'd call like, you know, like the whole Marriott United example, but they've done it similar with like Air Canada. Okay, where there's like an example of a great campaign that drove like $2.3 million worth of incremental Air Canada bookings through that. Yeah. We touched on United Connective Media. I think that one is an interesting one because it's that captured intent. Mm-hmm. Okay, what else are you going to do on a plane for 3.5 hours?
Exactly.
Okay, and so there's that captured intent time.
Try 15 hours from Melbourne to San
Fran. I know.
They've got me captured. They've literally got me captured.
That's it. And I think what's really interesting with that is that they're able to, as we said before, be able to stitch the seat back back to measurement. You know, Marriott is the other one. So, you know, you've got high dwell time, okay, but you've also got different properties inside a Marriott hotel that kind of might be kind of like a restaurant, okay, or it could be the bar, okay, and so they have the ability now to kind of like say, you know, this campaign drove incremental sales of this specific alcohol brand in the bar or in the restaurant or what have you as well. So it's not just like limited to that kind of like media network. It could be beyond from a commerce media perspective. But I think and this just goes back to my background before CitrusAd, but I think the most interesting segment, okay, that is emerging is fitness. Okay. And so when you think of fitness, it's a funny one because most people visit their gym more than they visit their grocery store every week. Okay, and they're using an app to be able to book classes. Okay, they've got high intent signals that are coming from that, where it's like class visitation. There, you know, there's like even kind of like non-endemic adjacency brands, particularly like when we've got GLP-1 is exploding. And so like Planet Fitness here in the US is the cleanest example of this. Okay, they launched in 2024. You know, they have full connectivity across their 19 million members, okay, that they have. And they have like in-club screens, you know, they've got digital audiences that are now plugged into multiple DSPs. Okay, so you can buy like the Planet Fitness audience on different DSPs. Then this is now kind of like taken a bit of an explosion internationally, okay, as well, because we're seeing kind of like others like in the UK, like, you know, the Gym Group and David Loy and Fitness First and those start to kind of look at ways that they can do that as well. But I have to call out, okay, because like where this all started, it wasn't really Planet Fitness. It was all started back in Australia again, okay, because it was, you know, Fitness and Lifestyle Group, which is like Fitness First, Good Life, Zap, Go, Jets, Barry's Bootcamp. They started all this in the early, you know, 2010s, okay, by building a screen network, okay, which was a real simple way to run a media network, because you've got captured intent while someone's working out on the treadmill, kind of thing. So I think that for me is that they're the interesting emerging.
And you're seeing that merge. That's is that a fast growing emerging category? That fitness commerce media space.
Yeah. I would say that's that and the fintech, the fintech area, which they're probably the two, because like groceries capturing some intent signals, okay, but then, you know, you're not only just shopping at a grocery store, you're also going to the gym, you're also going to the bank, you're also going on an airline, and then you're going to a hotel. So
I'm an absolute fitness fanatic geek with data and everything else, and there's a massive connected ecosystem out there. I'm running 2 different trackers on me at any one
Yep.
time. Strava just announced their native integration with Claude, and linking all that together with that visitation. I mean, it's primed for some really cool bits and pieces, but we don't need to go into that one because I could.
Yeah, I mean,
just like the pellets
look,
and the smoking, we could be here all
if you
day.
look at like MyFitnessPal as well, like people log all of their meals, into
that guy.
MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
Like, you can imagine a world like where there could be a retail media offering across MyFitnessPal or Strava or kind of like Whoop or whatever,
which really just shows you how much growth there is across the whole
umbrella
of commerce media, right?
And so that goes back to my earlier statement around, I think that the saturation it's half right, because there's still a wealth of opportunity, for, but it has to be done right, and I think that's the key call out.
Well, I could talk about this forever, Adam, but I know that Nick is itching to talk about. I cannot believe we've made it this far through a podcast without mentioning those 2 letters that everyone.
The bingo.
Have
characters.
A shot. Let's have a shot.
All right. So, Adam, fascinating. We're not there yet, so let's just carry on a couple more things. And what more could we talk about other than AI? We know Paul and I are off to Cannes very shortly to do something very exciting with Commerce Media Matters, and we know that AI is going to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Look, it is everywhere, and it is a buzzword, but it's way beyond the buzzword, right? This is just it's a generational shift and change across all of our touch points. But when it comes to commerce media, what are you seeing as like a genuine shift where AI is kind of making a change for the better in this area?
I really think the shift, that's occurring, is, and if you just kind of like take a step outside of all of the noise that is like in the market with AI, and like I said, like every conference that I go to, like it's either AI or incrementality are the 2 kind of like buzz topics, which was great with Path to Purchase because it was in store. That was the topic. But if you move past all of that noise, I think realistically, where we're probably going, is the search and discovery aspect that was human generated is converging now to being more agent. The first audience of a brand or a brand's product, in some cases, is going to be the agent, not the human. And if you really think about what that means, it really means that the agent deciding whether to show one product over another becomes really important. And so
or at least getting in the short list that the agent might show the human.
And so
correct.
I think for the brand, it's really important that they have to kind of get their catalog and their products in structured in such a way that's machine readable. And no longer is it kind of like important to kind of like only focus around the image and the image of the product, because the AI at this point doesn't care about the image of the product. They only care about what's machine readable from a description and all of that stuff. But what's really, I think, the anchor in all of this, is that connected identity becomes more important in the AI and the agentic world than what it has been in the past. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Is in my eyes, the agent's just a proxy for the human. It's not the agent that's buying the product for itself. It's a proxy. It's a tool for the person. It's a tool for the person. So understanding that it is Adam Skinner, and understanding that this is his identity and these are his preferences, means that the agent would be able to make proper and real recommendations, for that. And then I think the shift is going to be around making sure that because people are still, there's still going to be people that are going to be browsing to sites. There's going to be a mixture of people that are going to use agents. That's growing. There's some public available statistics out there around the growth of agentic commerce, or agentic initiated commerce is rapidly growing, but there's still a cohort of people who are still going to either browse to the retailer's site, Okay. Or they might just do search and discovery on the agent and then go to the retailer to complete the purchase themselves. Okay. So I think really connected identity and anchoring back to the person and back to the unique individual is still super important.
Super important. That's awesome. Can I just say, when I think about agent, I think about that the agent's going to like start talking to me like a Mr. Anderson, Agent Smith from The Matrix. I always think Mr. Morgan's going to get really kind of dark on me.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting. It seems obvious when you say it out loud, Adam, but I think it's a really interesting insight. I think that's forgotten is that if the agent's acting on behalf of Adam Skinner, it's still Adam Skinner that you have to think about targeting.
Yeah. Look,
it's people get lost in the fact that the agent's going to take it over, and Adam's right. No, they're the proxy.
Yeah, and look,
they're the proxy, and the reason why they're still the same is because that agent's acting with all the preferences intact, like you said, all the preferences intact of Adam Skinner, and so forth. I mean, maybe it was just me, but like that's a really I wanted to highlight that point because I feel like that may be lost a bit. I think everyone's getting wrapped up in this. We're targeting machines and agents. When you're right, they're a proxy for the preferences of the person that's operating that.
And also, there's a trust factor as well. There's a trust factor there. Like, if I'm a new user to an agent, okay, and I've never used an agent for shopping, search, and discovery, okay, and I ask it to recommend me, I'm in the market for some new shoes or something along those lines, and it just recommends these shoes that just have no connection to me whatsoever. The trust for me using an agent in the future for agentic commerce has been completely eroded. Okay. And so I think here that with identity, the agent becomes a far more efficient extension of a customer relationship with a retailer and a brand. And it's more of an extended relationship of what that retailer knows about the customer. Okay. So identity stops being the plumbing and becomes the floor. Okay. It's the most important foundation, okay, of what we're moving towards in an agentic world. I think if you also look at it as well, you've got, like we touched on QSIC before, but we've got other platforms out there that are using AI, okay, live in the creative layer, okay, as well. So one of the
on-site, like an on-site product?
In store.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, so whether that's kind of like using weather patterns, okay, it could be super hot outside and they're customizing the advertising audio to kind of like overlay that with a cold drink as opposed to a hot coffee or something along those lines. Okay, and I think this is where I would say like the creative part of AI is becoming very interesting because it's like adding that level of personalization at scale that really
was difficult before.
Yeah. Mate, this is as we expected. It's been an enlightening conversation, and you very much deserve the Path to Purchase award. Well done. Paul and I agree on that. You can have it. Because this conversation's been brilliant. And as Paul said, we could talk for hours on this, literally. But we're going to start to wrap it up. But before we do, we want to get into just a bit of a quick fire if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
All right? Okay.
Sure.
Here we go. What's the last thing you bought online?
I bought a new Mac charger.
Yeah, yep. That's a regular purchase for me. What podcast are you currently listening to other than Commerce Media Matters?
Kill Tony.
Oh, Kill Tony. Cool. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah. I have two podcasts that I listen to regularly. One's Kill Tony, and then the other one's the Matty John's Family Podcast.
The rugby league. Can't let
I've got to get my rugby league fix. So,
There you go. So what's your go-to online shop? Where do you go?
I have a few go-tos. I'm a DoorDash
DoorDash man,
fiend.
Right? Yep.
Okay. Love just DoorDashing anything.
Yeah.
And then I think my other online would be that I'm a bit of a tech enthusiast. So Micro Center is the other one, and then Ace Hardware. I just bought my first smoker. Okay, because we moved
getting
into
it.
a place.
Yep.
Here we go.
So I'm like a fiend now for just kind of like trying out new pellets.
Yeah.
So I get all that from
Adam. I'm I'm so glad that you said that at the end of the podcast. Otherwise, it would have been commerce media doesn't matter and only smoking and using barbecues does, because I'm a passionate.
Yeah.
Are you a TikTok? Do you TikTok? Are you watching or you're posting or just not? Neither.
No, I'm not on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. Like I do, like I like to kind of look at like Instagram shorts and Instagram reels and then YouTube shorts as well. Like,
so have you bought anything from Instagram?
Bought a number of things from Instagram, like where like I've bought like American Eagle shorts and jeans. Okay,
clothing. There you go. Yep.
I don't know if that was just the Sydney Sweeney campaign that drove me towards towards that, but yeah.
Powerful campaign. What's your most memorable ad campaign? Speaking of ad campaigns,
I think I talked about this on one of my LinkedIn posts. My most memorable campaign would have been when I was a kid, rocking up to doing the family grocery shop with like my parents and rocking up to like the local store, and at the time it was ARL. Okay, it wasn't NRL, but they had the Stimorol chewing gum packs. Okay, and you used to get the chewing gum, but then you'd get a pack of rugby league player cards. Okay, with it, and I just thought at the time I didn't realize that it was like that. That in itself was like retail media.
Yeah.
It was like a co-branded campaign, that you could only get from.
Stuck with you.
Yeah, it stuck with me. So
awesome.
Yeah, very cool. Well, Adam, thank you so much for joining us. We knew it was going to be jam-packed with knowledge, particularly after your award. Another congratulations for that. But you have really covered some really interesting insights for us today, and we're really appreciative of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Great insights. Thanks, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Commerce Media Matters podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe. We're always on the pulse of the ever-changing landscape of commerce media, ready to share the newest trends, insightful perspectives, and expert opinions with you. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making media that matters. This podcast is executively produced and edited by Priya Tahazadeh, with co-producers Sandy Ho and me, Rachel Fang. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Bidjigal, Gadigal, and Wurundjeri people, and we wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land.